just for our viewers, I will also want to go across to Mr. Vipul Saxena, who is an aviation expert who joins us on Mirror Live. Mr. Saxena, if I can start with asking, there's an entire fleet of 700 aircraft that this airline operates. And now there is this IT outage, which has, of course, left several passengers stranded. What do we know about these kind of outages, and what do we have any idea in terms of what kind of outage it is, what kind of services are being disrupted by it in terms of takeoff, landing information, etc., and what airports are impacted because of this IT outage at the Lufthansa office?
See, the information that I have and what your reporter just now covered, it is mainly to do with the ticketing and passenger manifestation. So only that service has got some IT glitch, which definitely would affect the departures and the departures of the aircraft, and also the transfer facility of the passengers, those who got a connecting flights. I think that kind of traffic will really get affected badly, and which will have cascading effect on complete traffic of Lufthansa Airlines. And also, there are other airlines who are operating from various airports, because the schedule of Lufthansa Airlines aircrafts will be changed because of this glitch. So it's a big problem, but I don't call it a danger. But yes, it's a IT glitch which normally takes about 2 to 3 hours to resume and restore. So that's what I can say about this.
Right. Mr. Saxena, we are also learning that German authorities are currently looking into whether there is some kind of a possible hacker attack. Do we have any information on that? Because you are an aviation expert, I also want to understand that, recently there was a Scandinavian airline which already was at the mercy of a cyber attack. Until I think less than a month ago, there were a lot of couple of US airports where also there was a prediction of a probable cyber attack. So how do these hacker attacks really impact flight services, and how is it so vulnerable that this very important route, this very important system is so susceptible to cyber attacks?
See, apparently the kind of information coming out, I don't think it could be a cyber attack, because cyber attacker will not stop at just holding on to the operations of the IT services. He will do something more. He will try to create confusion, which will create further panic. Okay, so I think apparently it doesn't seems to be a cyber attack. It seems to be definitely a IT glitch alone. That's it. Yeah.
Right. So when such an IT outage happens, Mr. Saxena, can you help our viewers also understand what it really means? Because, at an aviation airline sort of a space, what can an IT outage actually lead to?
See, the IT outage of this kind, with the symptoms which are coming in, now with this, what will happen is that there are a number of flights which depart from a particular airfield, let's say Delhi and Bombay, and then there are certain passengers who are coming in and maybe boarding these flights which are departing from these airports, or maybe there are certain passengers who will be boarding this flight and maybe going for connecting some other flights in some other destination where this aircraft is going to fly. So the complete chain will get disrupted, and there will be definitely a chaos till this problem is sorted out. It is going to create a huge discomfort to the passengers who are planning to travel by these flights.
Mr. Saxena, thank you so much for sharing all those details. We'll request you to stay on with us on Mirror Live. Meanwhile, I also have Mr. Devesh Agarwal, who joins us on Mirror Live. Devesh, appreciate you joining us. You are a chief analyst at BangaloreAviation.com. We want to understand from you, again, what we are trying to share with our viewers, that when we say there is an IT outage at Lufthansa Airlines, which has completely led to all flights 700 aircraft being grounded. Can you share some more details as to what really an IT outage could mean for an airline and what it can also lead to in terms of service disruption?
Thanks for having me. See, today, everything in an airline, actually in pretty much any major enterprise and airlines in specific, is so dependent on information technology systems. You have the entire reservation system. You once see simple thing. When I go to an airport, let's say, how do I get a boarding pass? Somewhere the computer has to look up my reservation. It has to pull up my reservation for that, say the counter agent to say, okay, then the counter agent will check in my bags. They will assign a baggage tag number, and then they will issue me a boarding pass that, okay, the documents are verified, etc., etc. Whatever, I've completed the formalities, and then I'm given a boarding pass. Now, once I get on to the aircraft, you will notice many times, they tick mark that yes, so and so passenger is boarded. So that's how they will reconcile that yes, the passenger is on board the aircraft. Similarly, when your baggage is tagged, while it is going through the baggage handling system, which is typically in the basement of the airport, it will be scanned, it will be security scanned, and of course the bag will also be scanned that yes, this particular baggage tag number has been loaded into XYZ container number, which is located at XYZ location inside the aircraft. So there are, that is one. Second, the entire your flight plans is all dependent on the IT system. Who today really relies on paper? So if I'm, say, for instance, flying from, I live in Bangalore. So let's suppose I take the Lufthansa flight from Bangalore to Frankfurt. Now I'll be traveling from India. I will travel over, say, Dubai. I might travel over Qatar or Bahrain. I might travel over, say, Iran or Iraq, then through Hungary. I have to go through each country's air traffic system and file that flight plan and say, I am going to be coming into your airspace at XYZ time and at XYZ height, etc., etc. Do you allow me permission? So each air traffic control again has its own IT system which automatically checks that yes, is all this okay, and sends its approval. Only when I'm approved all the way from Bangalore till Frankfurt does that flight plan get approved and go to the airline and say, yes, this flight is approved. So the amount of IT backend that goes into an airline is absolutely astounding. It is, believe it or not, I remember when I was a young computer engineer in the United States about 30 years ago, American Airlines used to have as many as 12 mainframe computers just handling their IT system. So the investment airlines make in IT is absolutely massive. And if for an airline to lose its IT system is essentially, it has now lost virtually everything. It really just cannot function. So the safest thing for the airline to do is just ground the flights.
Right.
Stop loading the system with all kinds of requests, shut down the system, trace the fault, and restart. If you recall, just about 15 odd days ago, the NOTAM system of the FAA had collapsed, and that resulted, with flights just getting, they could not let flights proceed, because the NOTAM system is what informs pilots while they're flying that if there is a problem en route their flight suddenly, how do I pass on that message to, that particular airline or that particular flight rather. So something as simple as that caused a flight disruption.
Absolutely.
Imagine,
Mr. Agarwal, appreciate you sharing the entire impact of this kind of an IT outage that can have on any airline. Meanwhile, Mr. Agarwal, if you can just stay with us for a bit longer, I will come back to you with a very important question that I also want to discuss. But meanwhile, I'm also joined by Mr. Amir Singh Pastrich, who is a senior aviation lawyer as well as a frequent flyer himself. Mr. Pastrich, if I can start with, as an aviation lawyer, when there is a situation like this, can you also share details with us? What about all the passengers who are left stranded at an airport in case of a situation where, no fault of anybody, but there is an IT clear tech glitch tech issue? So what kind of remuneration can these passengers expect or can file a case against Lufthansa for? Because this is a clear situation of being stranded at an airport and completely having all travel plans go haywire?
Yeah, hello. I think that, earthquakes happen, outages like this have to happen. As you were just explained, it's a huge system, and the most important thing is safety. So we have, of course, this concept of liability, and we want passenger rights to be respected, and we don't want passengers to suffer, and passengers have the right to go to court and a consumer forum.
Right.
But there is something which I'll get you the exact phrase. I'm not remembering it right now. I think it's called exceptional circumstances, which is recognized in every, aviation notification of the DGCA in India. It's recognized in the Carriage by Air Act, things that are
Right.
beyond the control of the airline. And that's a very difficult thing to establish. So if the passenger goes and says the airline did this, they have the onus and the responsibility to demonstrate that the airline was so at fault that they, by negligence and failure of theirs, whether it's the IT system or someone in the IT department or a bug or some failure, have shut down the IT and caused the complainant, that would be a consumer, to suffer. It's called extraordinary circumstances. And the extraordinary
Extraordinary
circumstances,
circumstances, right?
it is a difficult thing to get out of. And balance this with the fact that our biggest role in regulating airlines, anything from the DGCA, from the Ministry of Civil Aviation, and any authority anywhere in the world, is safety. You can't stop this on the side of the highway. This is an aircraft. And if something goes wrong in mid-flight,
Right.
the aircraft can be at risk. So it is always better not to take off. It is
Actually,
always
that
better
was
to
my
ground.
question
It is
to
always
you,
better to
Mr.
delay
Pasrich.
flights. Yeah.
Right. I was also coming to you for that
Go ahead.
as my follow-up question that, as you said, passenger safety is key. But what about a situation in which a Lufthansa flight is mid-air and there is an IT outage? So there clearly is a lack of communication altogether with even the crew on the flight. And in such a situation, what can the steps be taken, especially if there's a flight that's mid-flight and there's an IT outage and there's a complete lack of communication between the systems at the airports and the flight which is currently mid-air?
So
Can I
that
comment on
doesn't
that?
really happen because there are multiple systems of communication with aircraft, and communication on the radio is one thing. Communication on radar is another. They have multiple systems on aircraft. So one IT failure doesn't disconnect an aircraft normally from the ground. But what really happens is that the flight gets delayed because there's a buildup, and some airport, for example, doesn't want to start landing aircraft because of a technical glitch. So they'll be circling for longer.
Right.
There'll be some flights not taking off on time. And then there's the famous line which you must have heard of as a passenger many times, as a frequent flyer. Oh, the incoming flight was late. Well, what made that flight late? So it's all very well to pin it on the carrier and say that they're very bad people. But the fact is, ultimately, their main concern is to make sure there are A, no collisions, B, no ground accidents, and of course, the worst should not happen, no incident in the air. So for that reason, we don't impose liability
Absolutely.
generally within this industry in a tearing rush. We are quite careful, and we look at that word extraordinary
Right.
circumstances and broaden its definition to allow for extraordinary circumstances. Could be a wide range of things.
Right, Mr. Pasrich, that was very reassuring, and thank you for sharing those details. I will quickly also come back to Mr. Agarwal because I think he wanted to come in on my last question. Mr. Agarwal, please share your views.
So just to this thing, see, let's appreciate one thing. The IT failure has occurred within Lufthansa Airlines. Once the aircraft essentially takes off, it is within the control of the air traffic control of various countries. So there may be a lack of communication with the airline itself, but I can definitely assure anybody that the flight that is already on, en route is not going to have a problem, because it's not the ATC computers that have come down.
Right.
And as Mr. Pasrit said, you have radio communications, of course, radar is one. And then for transoceanic flights and all, where, the pilots are out of range, there is a kind of a computer-based data link communications protocol called CPDLC, which is kind of like a SMS system that
Right.
is restricted between the aircraft and this thing. You must have heard of the acronym ACARS, ACARS. Indigo Airlines in India uses it extensively. So the ACARS is normally used to communicate from between the airlines, within the airline itself, between the aircraft and the ground. And CPDLC is used by the aircraft to communicate with ATC. With regards to compensation, I will say something. There is a very specific law. In fact, I make it a point to say, in India, the passenger charter is not worth the paper it's written on, because there are so many loopholes provided. The European Union has a regulation called EU 261. It provides for up to 600 euros, if I remember, in compensation. Now, technical faults, like an aircraft technical fault, is not considered an exceptional circumstance. However, if there was like like a strike by employees and all, that is considered exceptional. So how the EU Commission will treat claims, and there are plenty of online sites which will process claims, so I'm not sure if they will treat, as Mr. Percy says, this IT failure as an exceptional circumstance, but consumers may have, a liability claim, which they should explore. I'm not saying that they will be successful,
Right.
but there is a very clear law called EU 261, and your readers who, can,
Yes.
they can Google it, and there is a
Exactly. Right.
procedure.
And that can be very useful.
I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Mr. Agarwal, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast, and same for Mr. Pasrich. We have some updates. Actually, Lufthansa has recently tweeted just about 6 minutes ago that the IT outage was caused due to construction work in the Frankfurt region, and unfortunately, this has led to flight delays as well as cancellations. They are working on a solution swiftly, and until then, they have requested all affected guests flying on domestic Lufthansa flights in Germany to book a train ticket and, in fact, request a refund on their website. So, well, Mr. Agarwal and Mr. Pasrich, that does answer a lot of questions in terms of whether there is any kind of compensation that Deutsche Lufthansa is willing to provide due to all the flights that have been cancelled and disrupted.